Hey everyone, welcome back to Express Yourself. Thank you for coming back. We love having you and we are excited to be here together. So grab your drinks, whether it be your espresso. I've already drank too much caffeine this morning, so I'm swapping to water. Today we have Joey with us and Aaron, and our topic is going to be about boundaries. But first, let us introduce ourselves. I am Joan Young. I am a mindful forgiveness facilitator as well as a body worker. With me today, I have Joey Reese.
Hi, everyone. Joey here, just returning from vacation. So I'm feeling a little bit foggy. So perfect time to talk about boundaries because this is the time when I lose all sense of how to take care of myself when I'm rebounding from vacation. So happy to be here. Hi, everyone.
Aloha, everyone. I'm coming to you live from a parking garage right outside my place of work. I work for the city, and I guess I'll make the announcement here. Because of a challenge from our illustrious leader here, I have resumed my practice in hypnotherapy. So, yeah, so that's happening.
Wow.
Awesome, Aaron. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that before we even get in? I'd love to hear what does that mean for you and what does hypnotherapy mean?
So Joan and I recently went to visit Joey to have a meeting of sorts. And at that time, because of the circumstances and situations that abounded, I let it kind of just come out of my mouth that I was thinking about getting back into practice. And as a hypnotherapist, I years ago, I had a practice for about maybe 14 to 15 years that I kind of gave up because I kind of got burnt out and all of these things. But after I let it slip that I was thinking about getting back into practice, Joey asked me, am I practicing? And at the time I realized that I was just talking about practicing and that if I'm really serious about it, I needed to get back into practice. So as luck would have it, I happened to be in a conversation with a classmate of mine from high school because this is our 20th reunion coming up next month. Oh my God, I just dated myself, but okay, whatever.
Oh gosh, you're so old, Aaron. Whoa.
And he said he wanted to quit smoking before reunion. So I said, well, it would serve me if I could try and help you. And so he became my first, and I have, as of yesterday, I have 3 clients. And just so as a update, that first classmate, he has told me that, like, since our first 2 sessions, he has not had a cigarette. So I'm like, wow, that's really cool.
Wow. That is nuts. Congratulations.
And Aaron, if our listeners want to know more about like how to sign up to be one of your clients, do you have some information that we could link under the YouTube page later for that?
Not yet. Like I'm still like, I just got my feet wet again, so I don't know like how to build that back up. But yeah, sure. If anyone's interested, I would love to talk about that at some point.
Yeah, so just comment below and we'll get your information to Aaron and Aaron will get in contact with you. So excited to hear about that. I want to be one of your clients, Aaron. I'm already like, yes, let's work on some of the reasons that I'm still eating the things I know I shouldn't.
Yeah, but I'm so rusty.
It's okay. I will totally sign up to be a test dummy because if you haven't been in Aaron's space, it's such a blessing and a gift. Just being in his space without him doing anything. So I can just imagine what his hypnotherapy practice is going to look and the lives it's going to shift.
Oh, thank you.
So cool. I just love the diversity of skills. It runs deep amongst you forgiveness practitioners. I'm loving it. Sweet.
Yeah. And Joey, what else do you do? I mean, we've talked about it. You do. So just so you guys know, Joey is the head honcho of the practice center. She's the one that's adapted this and developed it into this beautiful logistical for some of us who want to hang out in our brain format, but there's so much more to Joey. So Joey, what else do you do?
So right now I am immersed in getting ready to teach a HITS class. So I am a
Woo!
group fitness instructor. And I've been doing that, I think all 12 years, going on 12 years, starting with Zumba. And I know everybody goes, oh, Zumba, but it's work. But Zumba came out with Strong by Zumba. Now it's called Zumba Nation. And it is a high intensity fitness class that is like driven by beats of music. And it's one of these love-hate things. Like every time I get ready to teach it, I want to pee my pants and my heart just goes like this because I'm, it's like burpees and high knees and strikes and running. And there's so like a part of me that's like, what are you doing, Joey? You're done with all this. But I get a high out of it. I really do. But more importantly, look at what we do. We do group work, right? And I teach group fitness. I've had people ask me to do one-on-one, don't like it. I think something about the energy of people looking at one another, going, are you going to die? I'm not. Are you going to, we're good. Sweating together and high-fiving each other. I love that so much. It, to me, feels like the purest form of connection. You can't think about anything else. You're just there in your stuff. So I quit because I was burnt out. And also pandemic closed my studio at the in May of whatever year of 2020. And I kind of gave that up because I'm the throw everything out with the bathwater kind of person. Yeah, I'm getting better at that. And it's perfect because again, boundaries today.
Boundaries.
Yeah. So I quit and quickly gained a lot of weight because that is my management, mental health, physical health management tool. If I don't teach, it doesn't matter how many classes I think I'm going to take online or show up, I lose it pretty quickly. So that's been like the biggest, I think, piece of kind of getting back into balance for myself. Because then the other part is this, I sit here and I interview folks, I talk about forgiveness, I talk about mindfulness and attitudinal healing. We're trying to build up the practice center, look for funding. So those are the things that I'm trying to do, the executive director role, parts of it, which I'm really good at. And then there are parts that I'm just really a newbie. So some of those more accounting and schmoozing, not schmoozing, but you got to tell people what you do.
Schmoozer. Yeah,
and I'm like,
absolutely.
Just come into group and you'll find out. But not everybody wants to come into group and find out. So yeah, okay. I'm kind of spreading myself around those roles. And really, Erin, this is where I might be talking to you. It's not that I have imposter syndrome. I don't think I suffer from that. I suffer from laziness. I'm like, I can do that tomorrow. When nobody's really counting on you to turn in that report by 3 p.m., then you can turn in that report whenever. And there's a part of me that's kind of battling that out. Yeah. So what is holding myself a little bit more accountable to the things that I have to do so that I can do the things that I love to do. It's like practicing for my strong class that's going to be coming out in May, so that when I get to May, I feel good about it and I feel like ready to teach and guide. It's kind of that background stuff. So lots of hats. I love them all.
And Joey teaches in Hilo, for those of you who want to take those HIT classes, Hilo Y, and then coming up at a new location soon. So yeah.
But the Y right now dropping. So I can't wait for the two of you guys to come check out how much
I'm definitely going to make that trip. I will remember that I've committed to that. So let's get into boundaries a little bit. So we're just going to start with the basic. Joey's going to pull up the screen for me, and we're just going to talk about how we're looking at the definition of boundary. And also, excuse me, I'm just going to move that. So boundary, a protective limit established between oneself and others with the goal of defining where one ends and another begins. Clear boundaries enables individuals to honor their own needs, and this supports authentic relationships. In true connection,
like that definition, Joan?
I think that's good. But what's coming up for me when I read this, it's not just oneself and others, but it's also oneself and oneself.
And oneself and oneself.
Yeah, because Joey, I took your boundary class and I was like, okay, boundaries I get with other people, but I didn't realize how I had no boundaries with myself. And, we heard you talk earlier about like, I know I need to do this and I want to do this, but I'll push it off. Right.
Yes.
And it's like, if I can't keep a boundary with myself, how is that energy affecting other people's requests of keeping boundaries with me? Right. As well. And then what am I telling myself about boundaries? Are they really important if I'm not keeping them? Probably not. Subconsciously.
Even in the second part, which is in true connection, there is mutual sharing with clear boundaries and the felt sense of freedom for separate realities to exist at the same time. So when we talk about true connections here, I know I often preface it with connection to yourself and then others and then the community and the world at large, right? So that speaks to what you just said. When I don't keep boundaries with myself, then I am lacking that true self, like the real, like part of me that says, Joey, get up and take care of yourself. And then the other part that's like, right? There's that battle that happens. And so true connection with myself, I definitely feel it's not there. Yeah. So that second piece even supports what you just said.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then the great quote, givers need to set limits because takers rarely do. Yeah. That is huge. And I've seen that come up time and time again in my life. And I tend to be, Joey and I were just talking in the car yesterday, I'm a all in or all out. And so this is very big for me because I'll give and give and give until I'm so burnt out that I will just slam the door and not do anything. So as we talk into the next part, the flexibility thing, I was like, what? I didn't understand. I always thought they had to be like hard, I was going to say platinum, plutonium, whatever walls of boundaries, or flimsy whimsy. I never realized that there was this play in the middle, which blew my mind when you talked about it. So.
Oh, wow. Oh, cool. I can't wait to hear more.
Yeah.
Erin, where are you at with?
Go ahead, Joe.
No, I was just wondering if Erin had any thoughts about just the definitions we pulled up before we move on.
I've read it like 5 times now, and I'm great with running with it. Like I'm not sure I understand all of it. But I'm sure, I will be perfectly fine with it when moving forward in the conversation. I will admit, though, that like every time I read through it, all I can hear in the background is, we don't talk about Bruno.
So, Erin, talk about a little bit more of it. What in here, because there's probably other people out there that are having that same headspace around what in here is kind of resonating wrong with you or standing out.
What's resonating wrong is it's just like it's the smart ass in me that's coming out, because I read like a protective limit established between, and I'm like, established by who? Then my mind kind of like dovetails and like spirals down into, well, yeah, because you set your own boundaries, other people set boundaries for you, other people set boundaries that you don't even like sometimes not aware of that you cross. And then there's boundaries that like you bend. Like, for example, the reason I'm here in my parking garage is because there's a boundary set by a rule that says that I can't use city resources to do anything of a non-business purpose. And yet, like, I'm in my car because I can't be on this call in my office or on the city like network, but I'm in a city parking garage. So Is this and I get that that's not the boundaries we're talking about, but I'm like, the word boundary for me, like, my mind just automatically and naturally tries to nitpick at it, Yep. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Absolutely. And one of the things I heard you say that resonates with me is sometimes there's these boundaries we don't even know exist until we cross them. Yeah. Like, it resonates with the unenforceable rule. Like, I didn't even know that was somebody's rule, or that I even had a boundary around something until somebody crossed it. And I was like, ooh, that irritated me. Right. So.
I was talking to a friend about boundaries because I knew we were doing this morning. And he asked if I had seen the sign that this woman put up in a store. She was pregnant at the time. And it's a store that I go to regularly. So I know I knew who he was talking about. And he's like, did you ever see her sign? She had a little sign up right by the cash register that says, please do not talk to me about my body.
Oh.
Ooh.
Because how often do we cross pregnant people's boundaries, like touching them or talking about their baby or acting as right. And I'm thinking, ooh, I can identify with that, you know.
Yeah.
But I never would have considered like putting up a sign. Clearly, here you go. Boom.
Yeah. And talk about, Joey, I saw you do your hair and I know what that means, but talk about that boundary a little bit more if you can. Like how people tend to.
Yeah, then we just kind of elaborated. I can really identify with that because my whole life I've had to guard people from touching my hair or my daughter's hair in particular, the two of us. And then this person had never heard that before and asked me about it. And then I said, you know what? I bet you can't find one Black woman out here that hasn't had to deal with that. And so the other sense is then who's doing the touching without our permission? Yeah. Right. Who's doing the touching? So there's a lot of us out here who's crossing boundaries and you might not even think that that's a boundary, but what gives you the right to come in and touch me? It's a perfect stranger because my hair looks exotic. And that's usually the excuse. It's so amazing. It's so big. It's so exotic. So as soon as it's down, I see people's hands coming for it. It's the bizarrest thing. I've never had to throat punch anyone, but it makes me want to.
Yeah. And how often people are stepping those boundaries without, like, my son had big eyelashes and bright blue eyes as a kid. And as a baby, people would come up and like touch him. And I'm like, why are you touching my child? Do I know you? So different, and thankfully I've been educated by enough friends that I knew that very early not to touch people's hair. But I probably did it before somebody finally said to me, hey, can you not just touch my kid's hair? That's not okay. Right. Because it's this not understanding that there's a boundary, not understanding how that makes somebody feel. And then also the assumption that, like, to me, that's common sense. Why are you touching my baby when you don't know them?
Right.
So to have a sign, what a clear boundary that was. Although
hey, Kaipo, welcome.
Hi, Kaipo. Guys, Kaipo is joining us. Kaipo, can you introduce yourself a little bit for us? Just tell us who you are and what you do if you have time, or when you do, just holler.
He too is at work. Are you at work?
I'm at homework. My tonal's being installed downstairs, so it's kind of loud. That's why I'm on mute.
Gotcha. So Kaipo, just introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit who you are, what you do.
So my name is Kaipo Paiva. I'm a sergeant for the Honolulu Police Department. I'm the sergeant for the District 3 community policing team. So a lot of our work is done with outreach and prevention. We work with a lot of youth and a lot of nonprofits, and our focus is, community members and prevention. And I do a lot of trainings for the Honolulu Police Department. So I'm one of the lead facilitators. We have a new leadership program called the Basic Leadership Development Course for the Honolulu Police Department. I'm a basic instructor development course facilitator. So I teach police officers how to give presentations and stuff. And I teach them community policing to the Honolulu Police Department and others.
Kaipo, yesterday we were talking a little bit, and if you don't mind, I heard you talk a little bit about how people's assumption of what people need versus that boundary of asking people what they need. That resonates with me about boundaries. We were talking about cleanup, or people assuming somebody might want food when they don't need food or anything like that. So how does that come into with the work you're doing with the kids and the youth? Where do you see boundaries with the kids?
I think in my 22 years of experience as a police officer, I'm working with the city, I notice a lot of not people in general, but when they come up with these programs, they come up with a program and then say, here, I think this program could help you, versus finding out what the need is first and then developing the program around the need. And I think assuming what people need, we're going out and say, oh, you know what? I don't like the way, we should do a cleanup in your neighborhood because it's dirty. And people look around and say, why do we need to clean it up? It's like not up to the other person's standards of what they think it looks like. They look at their, Joey, I think Joey put it best yesterday. It's like, I don't like the way your neighborhood looks to me. I'm gonna make it the way I want it to look. Versus I think asking the question to the people, like, if you could have a better neighborhood, what would it be? And what would it look like? And have them kind of paint the picture based on their needs, because they're the ones that have to live there every single day. And maybe the neighborhood looks a certain way because it satisfies certain needs that they have over there. And who are we to judge and tell people this is what you need?
Yeah. Well, and imposing that, like, I'm going to come clean your area, you know, and using that time that could be used somewhere else. And then it's that need to, okay, now I have to keep, now I have another job of keeping an area clean because you know, yeah.
Well,
so I think
it's different. It's like if you go in and clean somebody's area, it's like you have kids.
Right.
If you keep cleaning your kid's room, the kids are like, oh, cool. Mom's going to clean my room.
Right.
You know,
yeah.
So it's
enabling
versus empowering.
Absolutely.
I'm having, some guilt feelings because I'm just, as you're talking and thinking about like the hierarchy of boundaries, because it's never, that's never done up. It's always done perception wise, down on the hierarchy. Like I will cross somebody's boundary like a child, but I wouldn't like my superior, right?
Right.
So we only do that with people we perceive to be below us on a hierarchy. So when you're talking about cleaning, I'm immediately, I go to my daughter's new place, and my love language is acts of service, gosh darn it. And so I will clean and cook and shop and stock your pantries and stuff like that. And in my mind, I'm like, I'm so great. I'm such a good mom. I'm doing all the things. If I had a mom like this, that would be so amazing. And my daughter's like, would you stop meddling with my stuff? This is how we like this. This is how we don't. Yeah. It's overwhelming for you to come in and do your thing in my home. She wouldn't have said it like that, but it just ended up in a fight, right? And I'm sitting here going, but. So I can very clearly see that it's a boundary issue. I somehow think that because it's my kids, I can do this. But in my defense, I do that to everyone. If I come into your home,
let me know the next time you're over. You can feel free to clean my house anytime, Jimmy, anytime.
So that I can cook in it for you what I think you should eat.
Yeah.
Yeah, the hierarchy.
Well, and it's the hierarchy, and I think the lack of communication. Because I have that same thing with my son. He lives with me, but my act of kindness is I'm like, his room is looking a little messier than I would like, so I'll just go in and clean. But I also don't realize that I'm bringing judgment with that, right? That my need to clean his room for me is just, I'm thinking this way, but how is he receiving it as a kid that I'm judging him for how his room looks? Why am I bothered? You know, all of these things that we don't realize our act could be bringing a judgment on.
I'm listening to all of this, and you could I just naturally, what it comes to me is all the forgiveness work that we've done, where we have that expectation of how things should look, or the expectation of I want this, so it must be that everybody wants this, which goes into where we teach, like absolutes. Like if I want this, and everybody should think like me, which goes into unenforceable rules, and then going to the positive intention, but the positive intention for me doing this is because I love them and I want to give something to them.
But even before doing that, when we think about preemptively not creating more grievance stories, I think one of my big issues with boundaries is that we would say the word, like Aaron, I loved your response. It's like, I'm kind of wrestling with the definition because we've been using the words for how long? Right? We say it like we know what it means and that we are all on the same page of what it means. But when I started really learning and practicing, it's different types of boundaries, right? I'm going to put up the categories and all that in a second, but it's the different types of boundaries. So for me, in my mind, like one is a question of love, me wanting to cook for my kids. It's not a boundary issue. It's not an expectation issue. Right. So it's about the clarity of defining words. I'm just finished Atlas of the Heart with Brene Brown, and that's all she does is define emotion words, right? The whole book. And so for me, the definition of, I didn't realize I was crossing her boundary. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You don't realize that these well-meaning organizations are crossing large communities' boundaries. Yeah. We just think, we just want there should be this neutral sense of what's better.
Mhm.
Right? Kaipo, it felt like you had something.
Yeah. And you know, when you said like, oh, I didn't realize I was crossing my daughter's boundaries. And then I think the next question that came to my mind is, oh, how would you know what your daughter's boundaries are? And sometimes I think maybe it's a part of asking, like, you know, what can we do? What can't we do? And that's one of the key principles we teach in the leadership classes. Sergeants, supervisors, do your officers that you supervise know your boundaries and expectations of them? And do you
Yeah,
know
but
your
that's the
boundaries?
thing, Kaipo. It's like physical boundaries, resource boundaries, mental. So I think there's absolutely, I would have said, I don't cross her boundaries around like her spiritual beliefs or emotional way of managing herself, or the way that she's spending her money or her time. Right. But me coming in and cleaning her home that she shares with a bunch of other roommates, and there's cats, and me wanting to make sure she has dishes, and me wanting to like that, to me, because boundaries, I was like, of course I respect your boundaries, right? Not recognizing that there's multiple different boundaries and multiple ways that we can talk about these boundaries, right? So it's like, what are you communicating if you're not realizing the different categories? So you could have done one, and I'm going to put that up now.
Yeah.
So we could have talked until the cows came home about mental, emotional, spiritual boundaries, but never about resource or social boundaries.
Yeah. Yeah. Or even the physical and body, which we kind of talked about earlier, but how so many of us don't even know we have those until it's been crossed. Right. Yeah. So sometimes we can say, let's communicate about it. But how often did you not even know you needed a boundary around something until somebody invaded that space, right? And the hierarchy being there, Joey, let's go back to that, is your daughter probably didn't even know she had, not that you don't give her a voice, but a place to say, Mom, hold on.
Exactly.
I have a boundary around this. And now I realize it because when you did this, this is how I felt. So I realized we get to be a little more clear about the communication there.
Right. Which is why this whole section is under encouraging conversations.
Yeah.
And I like that because the reason why I don't communicate a lot of my boundaries is because I'm afraid.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Kaipo, talk about that a little bit more. What are you afraid of?
I'm afraid that if I set my boundaries, that they might not like me anymore because, oh, Kaipo is so rigid, or Kaipo is so, I'm afraid that my boundaries will be too rigid for them. And I guess the naiveness of not knowing that, and I'm afraid of losing people. And I know that one of my biggest challenges is saying no to things and saying yes to everything. And, you know, I get spread really thin, and which goes back to not communicating my boundaries.
Mm-hmm. And not having self boundaries for yourself, putting other people's needs ahead of our own, right? And how much that shows up. And I can relate with you on that. To me, if I put hard boundaries, I'm the bitch that I've been, right? And so she's mean, she's a bitch, she's rigid. See, this is her showing up again. And so then I let people walk on me and let those boundaries get really wobbly. And then I end up being the bitch because I finally broke it and I'm done, right? So it's this cycle for me about if I set boundaries rigid, because that's how I always thought boundaries meant. I had no idea about the categories that you guys can see here, the rigid, loose, open, and leaky, but the flexible bamboo, like I literally think I could have bamboo ones that if today I have an extra space of energy, or maybe I have a little more time, I'm willing to help you. But normally I get to hold a real tight line with you because you tend to bleed over, right?
Exactly. That's that. It starts with the word aware, right? Though it's about the awareness of your level of energy and clarity about what that person is. There are people who's going to ask a lot. And I used to tell my kids, people get to ask you for whatever. Because a lot of times people go, you know what, so-and-so asked me. And I'm like, people get to ask you whatever they want. It's your job to be aware of, do you want to give that to them or not? Do you want to say yes or do you want to say no? I didn't, those are boundary conversations.
Aaron, when you're looking at, go ahead, Kaipo. Go ahead, Kaipo.
No, I think another boundary conversation is a great example about the woman you said with the sign about not even asking me about my body, and and don't even ask me to do this, and don't, and like I just realized now that those are boundaries that I never realized that I crossed about asking for things, and it's clearly stated in our HPD policy, like, why are you even asking? It says right here, black and white.
Mm-hmm. And how gray those areas of asking have become, right? Like some were really hard, like, don't ask a woman about her age. For me, I don't care. Ask me about my age. I'm cool with that. But we have really hard rules on some things, but yet going and rubbing a belly. I mean, when I was bigger, I had people ask me how far along I was. And that used to just crush me. So I've never done that to people, even though it's really obvious they're pregnant, unless they say anything about their pregnancy, I'm a hands off. But I've been on the other side of that, right? And how much my boundaries are set around that. Mm-hmm. Aaron, you're quiet over there. Talk about some of these types and how you are with the boundaries and what boundaries.
Well, okay. So I kind of just had an epiphany in that, like maybe it was clear to everyone else, and I'm late to the party, but I'm looking at these types of boundaries and I'm like, this is very complicated. And I'm like, it kind of just dawned on me that a boundary is a boundary because there is a question, or I'll just use that word. There's a question about safety. Whether that safety be physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, or even like boundaries between countries. It's always a security or a safety line or delineation or something. And I'm like, I just find it ironic, as Kaipo was talking, that we feel very insecure about setting boundaries, even though boundaries are meant to ensure our safety. Like that to me just now was like, holy crap, like how does that supposed to work?
Yeah.
So that's kind of what my light bulb moment was. It's like we can try and classify and categorize boundaries, but in the end they're all supposed to be boundaries are supposed to be a tool to ensure our own collective, or whatever the case may be, on whatever level, safety.
Yeah. If you had a look at these types, Aaron, which of these areas or regions for you do you have more of a challenge about setting boundaries on?
I would think I would have to say the mental, emotional, spiritual boundaries.
Can you talk more about that?
I think like growing up, I've kind of stepped into a habit of not thinking I have opinions. So like I've been so used to accepting other people's opinions or other people's boundaries, so that when they cross my own, I just kind of brood internally and not let them know they've crossed the boundary. So I feel like how my experience of my habits is like I accept other people's boundaries that they've set, as opposed to actively enforcing my own.
Yes. So it's keeping other people safe, but being willing to allow your safety boundaries to be going back to the safe word you're talking about.
Yes.
And how do you feel that playing out in your life, as far as how is that affecting you, do you think?
It's actually very interesting, because I've only realized of late, like in the last handful of months, that while my conscious understanding of how I operate to me seemed very, like positive, I hadn't really realized that I was living in a very stressful internal environment,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. How are you shifting now that you have this awareness? So we get these awarenesses. What have you set up moving forward around these boundaries? Or have you not? Are you still in the aha moment and holding on to adjusting?
Well, I'm still very much in the aha moment. And my environment has shifted like externally,
Yeah.
like in certain ways. So like those stressor factors, some of them are not there anymore. So I get to figure out or feel out what the new environment is with new eyes, and
Yeah.
I get to
Yeah.
have new opinions about how I react to things.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So,
And I love that you're
just to
giving
be
yourself.
clear-
Go ahead, Joy.
Oh, I just wanted to just say that this is not our stuff. That this work comes from Dr. Nicole La Pereira, the holistic psychologist's work in the book How to Do the Work. So anybody who's wanting to dive a little bit deeper into boundaries, as well as some other like self-care and how to live well, kind of, it's a really great book to read. But this section really made a huge impact for me. So it was helpful to kind of see like how this might play out, the combinations that don't work well for some. So when I'm thinking about, I've had a lot of problems with physical boundaries. I would think that I wouldn't, but I do. And I'm about to do a workshop with women. They're all women that signed up. It wasn't supposed to be just for women, but it was all women who signed up for this divorce and mindful forgiveness. And one of the questions that I noticed that a lot of us have problems asking is around like sexuality and physical. How do you feel good? Like, do you know what it means to feel good? And do you know how to ask for that or to say no around that? And I mean, how often do we teach from little kids? Oh, go give so-and-so a hug. Go give so-and-so a kiss. Come on, you're making them feel bad. Go, 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 go. So from little, we're taught that we really have no say in like who gets to enter our physical bodies and not. So it doesn't, it doesn't surprise me at all that then we turn into adults who don't know how to take care of this physical body, or until somebody else tells us what feels good and doesn't, right? And that's nuts. Right? So that loose physical boundary, I was like, ooh, I did spend a lot of time on just the physical stuff. Not only like, when do you go to sleep, Joey? When do you feed yourself? How do you feed yourself? How do you feed those kinds of things? But then the next question of feeling good and not feeling good and communicating that. It's hard to communicate it if you don't know.
And what love language you want, like being asked that question, like we were talking yesterday, Joey, about like, how do you want your setup in your house? Would you want your own room? Would you not want your own room? Like even the idea that I can make that decision, because we have this societal, you live in the same room with your husband, you give yourself or submit to your husband, depending on where your core beliefs. And it's like, what? That doesn't sit well for me. That feels like I'm being alien to what feels comfortable. So that's huge. Thank you for talking about that.
Yes. So how, I would like to know, Joan, then what, after you had some thoughts about that? Then
I think it's starting, the communication of like, hey, I like to have my own space. I'm coming from a wife whose husband was in the Navy, who's deployed all the time. So when he was gone all the time and I was used to that, so became very independent and having my own space. So when he first came back and retired, I was like, bruh, you got to learn to travel because I can't have you. And he would meet me at the door when I came home from work and take me to my car and be with me in the morning. And I was the basket case at first because I was like, thanks for loving me and you're loving me too intensely. I need space. I need to unwind. I need to exhale. And to this day, it's like, I'm going to go upstairs, but I get to communicate, hey, I'm going upstairs, not because I'm mad at you. I just need some me time. And that was big for him because he thought every time I went upstairs, it was because he did something wrong. And so he was like, shit, what did I do this time? And I didn't realize that. And part of me wanted to be like, quit being a victim, right? Which is not the way to handle it. And finally I was like, hey, just so you know, when I go upstairs, I'm going upstairs right now because I need space, or I'm not in the mood to be nice. And I know I get to separate myself in the moment so that the only person affected by my crappy mood in the moment is me.
Yes.
But communicating that took that breakaway where he didn't feel like he was being punished by me going upstairs.
Yeah.
And now it's like this cleaner. We talked about rooms. I would love to have my own room for just like a couch or a place to chill. And I realized yesterday on the way home that I've talked to him about that. And he's heard me say that a lot when we're arguing. And so I get to be clean and be like, this has nothing to do with our relationship. I'm here and I love you. And sometimes I want to watch something on TV that you may not want to watch. I want to watch, Married at First Sight or whatever, which is crazy. And I don't expect him to sit through that madness because I probably shouldn't either. But sometimes it's like, you want a game and I want to go watch this show. And we're not really together anyway. We're just operating in the same room. Sometimes I need space, and it has nothing to do with what you've done that day to me. It's not a punishment. I get to communicate that I want my own space, not to get away from you. Because when I'm angry, it's like, I got to get away from you. I want my own space. So be very clean. Like, I'd like my own space so that I don't get to that point of frustration or anger. So it's back to that communication of, wow, I have a boundary around this, and I get to be not bleeding all over his boundaries because I'm in my stuff. Or because I want what I want. So being clear on the communication there.
Or just constantly talking about what we don't want, right? We can go all day long talking about, I don't want that. I don't like that. I don't like that. Don't ask me that. Don't say that. Don't say that. Well, then the next phase of that is to articulate, what do you want when we're not angry, right? So the idea of the man cave or the she shed, like those aren't bad things. Yeah. Like to say, like, this is how much physical alone time I need. That would make for a healthier relationship, I would think.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. And like you said, be clean about it. So we're communicating it, just like sexual boundaries or what feels good to me. Yes. Right. We have this, what's happening in the movies or porn or whatever it is that you're pulling your sexual desire from. And then when you don't have that craving, it feels like you're not showing up or you're not feeling intimacy, or you're not being that second partner. And I mean, that's a whole nother discussion. But for me, it's like, we avoid it because we don't want to, because neither of us are in this mode of the Hollywood look of what sexual intimacy needs to look like. And just having the aha around, ooh, I get to communicate about that. Like, I would love you to hold my hand, but don't just hold my hand when other people are looking, because then that feels forced and I'm not good at forcing shit. So then it looks a lot like, why are you touching me? Right. So it's finding a balance so that it doesn't feel awkward that you're deciding to give me PDA when you haven't touched me in 6 weeks, which is okay because I'm not a huge toucher, but finding that balance to communicate the boundaries there. So.
Any of these examples stand out for either one of you two? Kaipo's having thoughts.
Yes.
It's hard for me to see Aaron's face, but I see Kaipo's face.
I can see Aaron smiling. That's all I got because the shadow.
I think I have a challenge with finding a balance between loose and rigid itself. And there's certain times that there's times where I know I should be rigid, but I'm loose. Mm-hmm. And like for my mental emotional boundary, I know I could, it would benefit me to be a bit more rigid, but I'm very loose about it. And I think I put it on myself where it's like, oh well, they don't know this and they don't know that, and so I can't blame them for the way I feel. But at the same time, when it happens over and over and over and over again, it takes a toll on us, on me mentally. And so I think expressing or communicating about how I'd like a more rigid boundary is one of my challenges.
Aaron, how
Waiting
about
to
you?
hear from Aaron. Yeah.
Um, I don't know. Like it's um I've read this slide a bunch of times now, and I maybe it's a resistance program coming up to like for it, or maybe it's my dyslexia acting up. But like seriously, I've read this slide a bunch of times now, and I don't know what it means.
Oh, okay. So, okay, I want to go forward here then. So the thought
Okay.
is when we are looking at the whole of life, sometimes we say things like, oh, I'm feeling good, or I feel like shit, or I feel like everything is bunched together in one. So one of the things that we do really well during mindful forgiveness is take one story and work with that to really find clarity, uncouple some stuff, throw away things that we don't need, make some room so we can be a little bit more creative in our thinking around that. So same with boundaries. Boundaries is like the spaghetti dog, that image that we use? The word boundaries to me is like the spaghetti dog. It's big and there's lots of moving parts. There's lots of juices in there. So to identify like exactly what boundaries, what do you think? Like getting to know yourself section. This is what I do with it is I'm going to go through today and I'll go, okay, how was my relationship to my physical self today? My goal is to be somewhere in the middle. Like my goal is to be bamboo-ish. So for example, I like on days that I don't teach classes, I like to get up at 5:30 and I like to be down by the water and I like to walk. Do my hour. So I like to do that in the morning because then the day doesn't get away from me and I get my time with the ocean, I get my steps in, all of those things. Right? If I were a rigid person, then I would get up at 5:30 and do that no matter what. No matter if my leg is hurting, no matter if whatever's happening. If it was rigid, I would do that no matter what. Loose means I have that intention, but I never do it. For me, neither of those feel good. So the bamboo-ness is I just traveled all day yesterday. I was up for almost 24 hours. I'm not going to get up at 5:30 today. I changed my clock to 7:30. That means then we're going to be talking at 9. That means before noon, I'm going to go do it. So my ability to be flexible tells me that I didn't sacrifice my sleep. I didn't sacrifice injury. I was able to still get my physical movement in because that's important to me, but not in such a rigid way or not let myself off the hook because I still need to move. Whether I traveled or not, I still need to move. So I can look at just that physical workout and I can put that on the scale for today and go, how did that feel? That felt pretty good. Yeah. Now, resources, kids. I just went on a trip. I had a budget. I blew that budget out of the water. So I was super loose with that, right? I need, like what Kaipo just said, I need to be a little bit more rigid with my finances, especially when I travel. It's like a damn free for all. Yeah. And so like that does not make me feel good. So I'm going to consider like, okay, do I take out cash? How can I be more flexible, but also not let myself off the hook? Because then those are going to turn into self-forgiveness stories. Finances, mismanagement of money, that's going to turn into shame around my worth and money. So I get to ask a better question, which is, okay, when I travel, I need to spend a little bit more time considering finances. Do I take cash? Do I put a cap on myself? Do I preemptively select activities? What can I do so I can better manage myself so that it's a little bit more flexible and not so loose? So I want to get somewhere to the middle of that, right?
And Joey,
so
I hear you talking about future, which is important here, is that what you can do moving forward, not what you should have done or how you, right? And that's a huge notice that I'm seeing is like, okay, it didn't work this time. Great. How am I going to set myself up for success the next time to be more?
Yes. Yeah. And also, how did it not work this time and all the other times? That's the loose business. That's
awareness,
myself of how off the hook. Yeah. Yeah.
This picture, like, I think compared to the last slide, this picture is a lot more clearer to me. Because
I agree too.
yeah, like my physical, I used to be rigid, but now I'm a lot more loose. And I like to be a little bit more rigid, but rigid in a sense where we're rigid to, like what we're eating and what we're doing and being more disciplined. But at the same time, when it comes to family events, what are my options there? So I guess in my head, I'm looking at the extremes where, rigid and loose. Rigid, I'm seeing less flexible, and loose means more flexible. But like Joe, I agree with Joey where actually, if you find the balance there, depending on the time and situation, find that balance between loose and rigid so you can achieve what you want.
Yeah.
Yeah, because loose to me is past flexible even. Loose is like you're throwing it in the towel, you're not even holding, right? So absolutely flexible. Because I used to think loose is flexible, but when you talked about the bamboo being in the middle, I was like, that makes more sense. Because like you said, how often am I going to, okay, I let myself off this time, I'm going to let myself off every trip, right? That, oh, it's a trip, I can go crazy. Right? Versus, no, I'm going to set myself up to be flexible, but not derail my train.
Right.
Of where my goals are.
So maybe I have a $50 grace period or $100 versus $1,000, right? It's like, where does, so I might use this sheet itself, like by printing it out. And if I was curious about how I am around certain boundaries, I might put that on a sticky note and just kind of move it around just to see if I can get, because I'm a visual person. I like kinesthetic, like manipulating things to figure me out, right? I'm not a huge journaler, but this is how I would use that is with my physical, I was pretty flexible. I did get it done. Now, if the day goes by and I didn't move, then I would stick that over at loose and sit there and have a conversation with myself going, I wonder what that was about. And also I might give myself then an opportunity to dance and get those steps in before the day is done.
And maybe have a stronger boundary next time too, right?
Yes.
That, okay, I know if I miss a day or I miss 2 days, it's a slippery cycle for me.
It is.
And how, okay, I don't get to, my bamboo needs to be closer to rigid than it does to loose, because if I slip to loose, it's a downward cycle. So knowing like, that.
Seriously, downward cycle, like 30 pounds in overnight. Like it's so bizarre how unconscious I go around that. So to me, this is a particularly important one where for somebody else, it might be mental, emotional. Like somebody is constantly telling you all their crap all day long, right? You guys know my boundaries around that because I articulate it. In fact, I get made fun of, right?
No, but it's very nice because one, it feels like you trust us. Because so for those of you who might not know, Joey will say, don't ask me your questions. Like if one, find somebody else, Google, look at other facilitators, find your answer other places because you know the answer. So for me, when I come to you, I already hear you. Joey's going to tell me this. Can I just trust what I'm feeling and trust my gut? Do I need to reach out to somebody else before I go to Joey? And then, yes, maybe I still can go to Joey at that point because I've already exhausted that. So that boundary for you is a beautiful, clear thing. And for me, it helps me, even though you're setting a no, it helps me be more secure in who I am. So your boundary does help me. So the story about if I put boundaries, people will be left alone. No, it doesn't make me feel like I want to leave you alone. It really helps me with that. Aaron, I want to go to you a little bit. Does this make more sense to you than the class slide? Do you have a better?
Much.
Yeah.
So much. I mean, I'm looking at this slide and I was listening to what Joey was talking about plotting it, maybe like the ending of a day. And I'm like, I'm so going to do that. Cause if I do that toward the end of the day, then that still gives me the rest of that day to decide how I want to move forward. I mean, like, thinking of a boundary on a gradient is so brilliant. I love it.
And it's not a hard rule. So I love it too, because it's not doing that unenforceable rule where there's either a yes, I did it, no, I didn't. There's okay, today I showed up at like I go scale 1 to 10. Okay, today I showed up at like a 5 of where I wanted to hit. Okay, maybe I have some room to improve, but versus either I didn't do it, so now I'm going to beat myself up for not doing it. Aaron, what's coming up for us is our conversation about our mileage. So Aaron and I are training for the marathon together. I blame him, just so you know. So it's Aaron's fault. I hope to have a shirt that says he made me do it. And we were just talking about, we walk together on Sundays, and we both were like, I was like, we only want to walk together once a month and then we'll do it on our own so it's a little easier? And both of us had the same thought. Aaron, I'll let you share what the thought was though.
My thought was, well, I'm open to having more flexibility in the training regimen. However, I'm not sure I'm at a point where I have the willpower and discipline to say that I will actually walk through it. So having, an accountability training partner on a more rigid, perhaps, basis would help me. But I'm still open to the flexibility.
Right. And for me, it's like knowing on Sunday that I get to walk because Aaron's going to be there. Sometimes that's the rigidness I need. So I get up and do it. Versus if it was just for myself, I may be more on that loose, which is an aha around boundaries. So guys, we are over the hour mark, but this has been such a great call. And maybe we get to talk more about boundaries moving forward, because I think we have so much here more to do. And I want to honor the hour call time. So if you guys, and Aaron, I'm going to start with you. What are you taking away from this call? How are you feeling going out of this call?
I'm excited to work with that page, because one epiphany I had with that slide was that when I first saw it, I thought I was kind of loose everything, like on the boundaries. And then as I thought about it more, I realized, like, the things I'm more cavalier about, I also tend to chastise myself about a lot. So that means that, I'm giving myself a lot of crap for something that I'm not so loose about. But I just allowed myself to, I get to figure out, or I get to, feel out more like where I'm actually on those gradients. So I'm really excited.
And I love that, celebrating where you are doing it well, because a lot of times our focus is only on what am I doing wrong. So thank you for that awareness and sharing that, because now I'm like, aha. How about you, Joey?
Yeah. I think the piece that I'm going to take away is kind of me as part of a whole, because I do tend to have a pretty domineering personality. And so people that I am caretaking or caring for, I do have a tendency to kind of bulldoze. So to be a little bit more mindful about, it's just Joey, so she talks like that. I don't want that. I do want to be respectful and show up, not lose all of me, because I am going to be a bulldozer. So as I'm looking at my own, I can also think about, in what areas did I cross over somebody else's boundary? And what was my intention there? So, because I think I have space to look at it from more angles now. So I think that's where I'm gonna focus on.
And that's an aha in itself. Space, creating the space that you can look at it from more angles versus just from your view.
Absolutely.
Kaipo, how about you?
Sorry, you cut off. Say the question one more time.
Just what you're taking away from this call. What was your aha or golden nugget around the call, and kind of how you're leaving the call?
I don't think rigid. I don't think you have to. It's not an either or, rigid or loose. It's about, being flexible with rigid and loose for me. And I think it's okay. Be committed to your goal and flexible with how it's supposed to look, but at the same time, be rigid with what. Set your boundaries. Identify. For me, it's I think I have to know what my boundaries are, and just say, here's what I won't do, but I'm willing to be flexible with it. So, and I think in attitudinal healing and courageous conversations is just having the courage to say, "Ooh, I'm not going to do that," but do it with a smile.
Yeah. And I love even the giving the option, right? It's communicating, hey, that doesn't work for me, but this might work. And also being okay with a no, which that's still, for me, that's a funky thing. That no feels, I'm still learning that no is a verb, noun, all of the above, and it's a complete sentence. And I don't have to go, no, da 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 da, make up a bunch of excuses of why I don't want to do it. No, it doesn't. But I'm leaving it with be better at communicating why these boundaries are important to me, to those who I love. Like I'm setting this boundary because I need this for me, and here's why, versus using it during an argument and then wanting to use it later and not understanding why that person feels uncomfortable around it. Well, I get to be clean ahead of time before it gets there. So that's my takeaway from the call. Thank you all for joining us. We will be back on May 11th, actually. So we're going to go 3 weeks this time, just because I will be getting to see my mom who's dealing with Alzheimer's. And so I'm going to make space to do that. And we're going to set boundaries ahead of time. We're going to jump to 3 weeks this week and communicating it ahead of time. So we will pick a topic for next week. It may still be boundaries. I think there's so much more to jump in here, and look forward to seeing you guys all. Thanks for joining me, guys. It's been a pleasure. And it's so nice to have men, women, and all different backgrounds coming to this call, all representing. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks, Joan. Thanks, Kaipo. Thanks, Aaron.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks for having us. See you guys.